been off with that Popham fellow, but now I pray most earnestly that the weather stays like this for the next fortnight." "And I thought I was shot of those damned catamaran torpedoes," Lewrie replied with a groan. God made women just hellish fine, he thought, sleeping or just laying close like this. They're better than a warming pan. The summer before, his frigate, HMS Reliant, had been tasked to experiment with a variety of infernal engines designed to drift in on the tides and blow up some of the thousands of French invasion craft. There had been a real attack with them against the port of Boulogne, but the results had been extremely disappointing. Lewrie had thought that would be an end to them, but no. Captain Sir Home Riggs Popham, the clever fellow who had invented the Navy's new flag code, had staged an assault on Fort Rouge, a pile-built battery outside the port of Calais, and since Lewrie knew so much about torpedoes, he had been roped in, despite what he thought of them. Sure enough, of the two launched, one went far off course and blew up harmlessly, and the second did a disappearing act. The lone fire-ship sent in exploded too soon, too, and the whole thing had been a dead bust. After that, Admiralty had given up on torpedoes in general, and since the middle of December, Lewrie and Reliant had been anchored here in Portsmouth awaiting new orders, and the foul weather had penned them in, fresh orders or no. For which he was, this moment, damned thankful. This was simply a splendid way to welcome in the new year of 1805. When wakened at 4 a.m. at 8 bells in his great cabins aboard ship, anchored far out in St. Helens Road, it had taken a long look and a hard try to leave his hanging bedcot, all his blankets and his coverlet, a quilt or two, and the furs he'd bought to brave the cold of the Baltic before the Battle of Copenhagen, and he had still been cold. His cats, Toulon and Chalky, had found it too nippy for them too, and had burrowed under for a rare once, and would not be turfed out either. And the long gusty sail to fetch alongside the King's Stairs, in a whistled-up bumboat, had left him chilled to the bone, with his teeth chattering halfway through breakfast, and a whole pot of scalding hot coffee. "Comfortable?" he asked her. "Blissfully," Lydia murmured back. "Warm enough?" "Delightfully so," she assured him, then lifted her lips to his for a soft and gentle kiss. He stroked the length of her back and her flanks. Her thigh thrown over his slid higher. "But, except for your feet, it seems," Lewrie said, grimacing. "I could say the same of yours," Lydia replied, giggling as she slid her foot down next to his, wriggling her toes as if to grasp, or play at toe-wrestling. "Alan, I hate to ask, but might you mind pouring me a cup of tea with a dollop of brandy?" He let out a theatrical groan and a weary, "Well, if I must." Outside the bed-covers the room was merely cool, not frozen solid, but Lewrie made a quick chore of it, pouring tea, adding sugar and a splash of spirits. "You are a dear," Lydia vowed quite prettily as he handed her the cup and saucer and hopped back into bed. She stood up to prop herself against the thick pillows and drew the blankets up to her neck. "Damned right I am, and I'll thank ye to remember it," Lewrie hooted, which brought forth a laugh. That was another point in her favour, in Lewrie's books at least, that in private she allowed herself to be raw, open and genuine, and to laugh out loud when amused. In public, well, that was another matter, as Lewrie had seen early on in London. As late as breakfast here at the George Inn, not 2 hours before, the difference between the private Lydia and the one which wore her public face was as stark as night from day. She'd been homely as a child, and still thought herself so. In her late teens, her first exposure to the marriage market of a London season had been cruelly disappointing, even for a viscount's daughter with a dowry of £500 per annum, and a future beau's access to more land and property than most people had hot dinners. The beautiful, the giddy and silly, who'd only fetch £100, had ruled the rounds of all the balls, salons, routs and drums. Years later, at her lovely mother's harsh insistence, she'd been placed on the block again, this time with £2,000 for her dot, and Lydia had been knee-deep in slavering swains, most with the twinkle of golden guineas in their eyes, which had disgusted her to the point that she had treated them all most rudely, which only made the greediest declare her modern and delightfully outspoken. And when she'd finally wed, quite late, Her choice